are times in life when you have to choose between the heart and the head. It's as if your emotional side is competing with your rational side, and oftentimes these choices are really hard to make. Case in point is the Ducati Diavel V4. Now at the price that this motorcycle sells, there are incredible options in the market. You've got superbikes, super nakeds, and some of the best adventure bikes that money can buy. But even with all those options in the market, there is something about the Ducati Diavel that makes you gravitate towards it. Allow me to explain.
I had close to a week to spend with the Ducati Diavel V4, and in that time I managed to commute, get stuck in traffic, ride it hard to my heart's content, or aimlessly cruise around town. And throughout the entirety of my time with the Diavel, the one thing that tugged at my heartstrings was the awesome V4 engine.
The mad engineers at Ducati have come up with what is undoubtedly one of the most insane engines to have ever graced a motorcycle. The V4 Gran Turismo is like that delicious Italian pasta that keeps tasting better with every bite. Or in the case of this engine, you fall in love with it with each passing kilometer.
165 bhp and 126 Nm are its headline figures, and this should give you a fair idea of the ferocity that this engine packs. You won't be wrong in assuming that it would be a task to handle all that power, but that's not the case when you ride this bike.
At low RPMs, the engine is a little lumpy and grumpy, but it is nowhere near as it was in the case of the 1260SL Twin. When you find yourself in the mid-range, you'll feel that the engine feels so smooth and creamy.
A lot of torque in the mid-range makes it a pretty responsive engine, and pulling quick overtakes or making a dash for the gap that's closing in traffic is almost like child's play on this bike. Given the firepower that this engine has, I was amazed and relieved in equal measure about the way this engine manages heat. At standstill and at low speeds, which is typically when there's less load on the engine, the rear cylinder banks deactivate, saving your thighs from cooking. The bike does feel warm, but it doesn't get to the point of feeling uncomfortably hot. Even in 38-degree Mumbai summer, this engine manages Indian traffic surprisingly well.
But when the opportunity presents itself and you find yourself on an open road, and it's the day when you decide to be the bravest you've ever been, you can roll onto the throttle all the way to the stop and see that needle go all the way up to the 11,000 RPM red line. That's when your mind will be blown.
The sound of the intake as the engine gobbles air and fuel to make those 160 plus horses, the feeling of being pinned into the seat as the Diavel surges forward relentlessly, the sensation of speed, wind noise and sheer exhilaration takes over, and it is something that's best experienced. The rush of adrenaline that the Diavel offered left me scared, joyous and entertained in equal measure. It reminds you of what it's like to have a beating heart. The Ducati power launch system is another genius trick to experience the exhilaration of the V4's acceleration without spinning your wheels and in turn, you spinning out of control. Seriously though, the Diavel is so quick, you'd rather print Arrivederci, Italian for goodbye, on your riding jacket for the world to read as you scream past them. And with these quad pipes, the engine also sounds really good.
Sounds really aggressive.
Since this is a top-level Ducati, there are multiple settings for the ride modes, engine power, traction control, etc. I found the throttle response in touring mode to be quite friendly, and it felt very natural even with the engine set to full power. Sport mode is where all the thrill lies, and I quite enjoyed this mode on winding roads as well as on open highways. Switching to urban or wet mode drops power to 115 bhp and softens the throttle response quite drastically. However, I found the throttle response in these modes was quite dull and disconnected, so much so that I stuck to touring mode while riding in the city. That said, the softer throttle response in urban will be more than welcome for those who are stepping up to such a powerful bike and want to take their time to get used to it. And thankfully, even the bike's nimble handling belies its size and weight.
Well, I don't know what secret ingredient have Ducati engineers infused in this bike, because look at it, look at the size, look at the weight, look at the wheelbase. Look at all of this and you think, oh, this is going to be a really difficult motorcycle to negotiate turns with or flick through traffic. But no, it just handles like a regular motorcycle when you flick through traffic. You just get used to the length of the wheelbase, the length of the motorcycle, and that's about it. You're just filtering through traffic without even thinking. So spend a little time riding this bike and it just feels so agile and nimble. I was completely blown away by this character of the bike.
Frankly, the Diavel's handling is great, and what bolsters your confidence is the electronic suite like the traction control system, which works so seamlessly in the background. And when it's time to drop anchor, the Brembo Stylema brakes are simply superb. There's ample bite, progression and feedback to bring this big, heavy bike to a stop. Even the ride quality is surprisingly good for a power cruiser of this type. You got a fully adjustable USD fork and a monoshock, but crucially, there's 15 mm more wheel travel at the rear. This allows the Diavel to manage Mumbai's bumpy roads very well, except for the oddly large expansion joints. But one must remember to maintain the right tire pressures to avoid breaking the rims in case you're unable to avoid hitting a deep pothole. The oil cooler cowl also sits pretty low, but since it is placed so close to the front wheel, you manage to get past some tall speed breakers without scraping it. Nevertheless, exercising caution at all times would be wise.
Now, although this motorcycle is classified as a power cruiser, you'll notice that the foot pegs aren't set forward, but rather mid-set. The handlebar is pulled towards me, and this results in a riding triangle that is quite comfortable. So you can commute on this bike, you can also go touring without thinking twice. The seat is also very comfortable, and if you look at the space for the pillion, there is enough room.
And now that we've established how good the Diavel V4 is in many aspects, there is still room for improvement. Some of the plastics, for example, could have been of a slightly better grade. The switchgear could have been taken from the Multistrada V4, which is far more intuitive and easier to use while scrolling through the vast menus. The asking price at well over Rs 30 lakhs on road is a hard pill to swallow as well. But I'm okay with all of this considering the way the Diavel looks. It brings a sense of occasion even before you've fired up the engine. How else can I explain that chunky fuel tank, the floating effect of the seats, and that attention-grabbing 240 section rear tire that's mounted on what is one of the most beautifully finished alloys we've seen on a motorcycle? And, as we've come to expect of a Ducati, the attention to detail is just lovely. Like the machine finish on the alloys, the honeycomb effect on the taillight that looks striking when the brake lights come on, and even the positioning of the turn indicators that look like the devil's horns.
The Ducati Diavel V4 is one of those few motorcycles that manage to tug at your heartstrings. I love it for the way it looks, it rides, and the ballistic performance of its V4 engine that reminds you what it's like to feel alive. This motorcycle really makes you feel special, and isn't that how a motorcycle should always make you feel? Which is why I guess it's okay to listen to your heart at times when you're making decisions.